Hi everybody, and it's a great pleasure to be here, even if it is for the last session of ReLRace program, which was a very nice program. I really enjoyed both the activities, the inspiring work of Vincent, who was with all his team actually of postdoctoral team in particular made fantastic work if we consider the usual kind of program that we have in France with AMR program. This one is really a success, I would say, in terms of all the production it has led to, and it was really a great adventure, a great moment. So thank you a lot for that, Vincent. No, so this last journée d'études, this last workshop is devoted, as you have seen, to the question of what I wanted to entitle the spirit of races. The idea was to focus on the fact that generally in historiography on race, there is a specific focus on the question of race and racism related to biology or physical anthropology, and even for those who want to trace the proto-history of the idea of race, as some say, they tend to evoke the idea of a race which is proto-biological, insisting on some natural characters which are transmitted over generations. And what I wanted to analyze a little bit more was the fact that in many cases, actually, the notion of race was strongly associated, not specifically with biology or biological determinism, I will say, in particular, but more with specific spiritual characters and value, which is quite obvious, of course, if we consider the early modern period, where it is very important to insist on the fact that there is a grammar which is omnipresent of the idea of groups, lineage, which are marked by spiritual faults, sins, or virtuous acts of their ancestors. And so where the relationship between a spirit and body is totally the opposite. This is the will and this is the spirit, which is the most important and which impacts even the body characteristic. And I believe it is very important to understand this kind of way of thinking, which is very important for the early modern period, and this is why it is quite nice to have two people who will address this question of early modern period on that respect at the beginning of the workshop. What I wanted to emphasize also is the fact that this kind of reasoning, this style of reasoning, is still prevailing in the 19th century and the early 20th century. That is at the moment where we tend to consider that predominates the so-called idea of race as understood as something which is linked to biology and anthropological characters. This is something which is generally neglected in a big part of the historiography on race and racism. So this is, I guess, what we will focus on later. Either the prevailing idea, which we will see, at least in my own talk, the fact that even at this period in the 19th century, there is a very complex relationship between values, moral values, spiritual values, and body characteristic, and that a lot of way of thinking insists on the fact that moral values and spiritual values have an impact on the body and are transmitted over generations, so that we can think the formation of really spiritual races. And we will see that this is something which is important in various way of thinking political work, especially in France, but I guess it is the same in other places. And also a central idea which is omnipresent is the idea that some races are characterized not specifically for their bodily characteristic or physical characteristics, but more for their relationship with specific spiritual values, religion, etc. I was thinking, for instance, of all the works dealing with the Slavonic race, for instance, in the Pan-Slavism movement. It's very characteristic of that, but we can think also, and unfortunately we don't have anybody on who will talk on that, but for instance, Japanese nationalists in the late 19th and early 20th century insists a lot. I will just give the example of someone who is very famous, with Suzuki, the specialist of the Zen philosophy, who insists on the fact that the Japanese race is characterized, and more generally the Asian race is characterized by spirituality, whereas on the opposite, the so-called Caucasian race is characterized by materialism, and so this is something which I think it is very important to insist on, and I guess we will have some example of that specifically through the example of spiritual racism, either in Nazism or fascism, but it would be interesting to have a broader program on that respect. Unfortunately, we wanted to have people addressing the question, either dealing with the question of pan-Latinism, but it was not possible to for the reason of the race, the Le Mans race. It was not possible to have her. We wanted to have someone on the case of the Irish, because it's very important in the debate between Irish and Anglo-Saxon at the period. But at least we have a few examples this afternoon which will deal with this kind of question. So I will close here my small introduction and thank everybody for being here, and